Hello, I'm Ryan Bourne, Cato's R. Evan Shaft Chair for the Public Understanding of Economics, and I'm delighted today to be joined by former CEO and co-founder of Whole Foods, John Mackey, who's currently the CEO of Love Life and a Cato board member. He's the author of the 2024 memoir, The Whole Story, Love, Life and Capitalism. So John, great to have you with us. You co-founded Whole Foods as a pretty scrappy startup in Austin, led it for over 4 decades, and it was a really mission-led firm. You know, you wanted to push the health benefits of healthy eating, healthy lifestyles, but you were one of many natural food stores that were kind of sprouting up at the time, many under what you describe as kind of hippie leadership. What do you think it was about Whole Foods and your approach that meant it was able to break out and become a national chain in the way that those other natural food stores perhaps weren't able to?
Well, I can only speculate on that. You can never know quite for sure why that happened. But I think part of it is that we had a desire to be a national chain. We had a vision for it pretty early on, not at the very beginning, but as I tell in the book, The Whole Story, it was kind of after my girlfriend and I visited the Bay Area in San Francisco that I realized, wow, they don't have any stores like Whole Foods here. We could open up here in the Bay Area and jump outside of Texas. And that seemed to be a crazy idea, but that's what we did and it worked. So first we had the ambition for it. And I don't think many of the other people, they were thinking more just small or have a few stores in a city or a few in a geographical area. So I was thinking bigger, sooner and earlier. And then we went and raised outside money. We raised venture capital money back in 1999. And that enabled us to go to the Bay Area and open stores there. And they were successful. And then we started thinking for the first time about maybe we could be a national company. Also, I think people were just satisfied to have just a few stores and earn a good living and be sort of important in their own neighborhood, so to speak, in their own cities. Back in the day, when the first natural food supermarkets started sprouting up, it wasn't a very friendly market. I mean, it really was mostly counterculture people that went there. My parents and their generation, they didn't shop in our stores. They thought they were crazy. They wanted to go get highly processed foods. That's what they thought was a miracle of technology.
Do you think that your favorable view of capitalism kind of gave you an edge? Because what really comes through in the book is the way that you recognize that market capitalism is based on mutually beneficial exchange. So to the extent you make profits, it's a reflection of the fact that there's enough customers out there willing to purchase your products, which they see inherent value in. You weren't afraid of growth. You weren't afraid of the pursuit of profit. Nor were you afraid of the cut and thrust of kind of capitalist deal making. So do you think that might have given you an edge over some of the other stores that did have national ambitions?
I do think we had more of a business perspective on things. And we did, perhaps it was my libertarian beliefs, I just really thought a business was a win-win-win game. It was never a zero-sum game in my mind. It was you're always trading with your customers and your employees and your suppliers for mutual benefit, mutual gain. That's the miracle of capitalism. That's why humanity has been lifted out of the dirt in the last 250 years. And the Industrial Revolution led humanity out of this trap that we were in, which really was a zero-sum game. And I just thought it would be fun. I'm an entrepreneur. The challenge of it, I thought it'd be fun to do it. And we had a lot of good qualities that lead to success. We were very picky about our locations. It was very picky. I always knew if we screwed up an early location, that might be the end of the game, end of the story, because we wouldn't be able to get capital if we weren't doing well. The first 25 years Whole Foods was open, we never actually opened a store that ever failed. And it's only later when we were to branch out into locations that we weren't sure we'd be successful in. And we were still successful in many of them, but we finally had, I think after 25 years, we closed down the store. We had such a long run of everything we opened up was successful. And that built confidence and built our ability to raise capital. We were frugal. We saved our money. We reinvested it. We were careful on our locations. We built a great team. We did a lot of things right. Made a lot of mistakes, and we learned from our mistakes and corrected them.
Grocery stores seem to have become a bit politicized in recent years. We've had the high inflation, concerns about affordability, and now New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani has even proposed opening city-run grocery stores. As the co-founder of a major grocery chain, how do you react when you hear a politician promise to swoop in and provide groceries more efficiently than profit-making companies?
Well, of course, I think it's nonsense. It's what does he know about the grocery business? I don't think he knows anything about the grocery business. I'm not sure he's ever worked in a grocery store. I don't know if he's ever worked in a business at all. I'm not sure he understands much about business or markets. I mean, he's a socialist, so he doesn't understand capitalism, or he wouldn't be a socialist. I mean, hey, the Margaret Thatcher quote was as true when she said it, and it's still true today. The problem with socialism is you eventually run out of other people's money. If they're willing to operate the grocery stores and lose money, then they possibly could be cheaper, because you're just for-profit businesses can't operate for very long if they don't make money, because they can't pay their bills, they can't pay their employees, and eventually they're forced to shut down. So perhaps New York can have government-owned grocery stores that basically are losing money, but they're just simply subsidizing it through taxes on other people. As long as you have money from somebody else, you can afford to operate at losses. But generally, we all know what the stores will be like. They won't be well operated. They'll be dingy. It'll be interesting to see whether they pay their workers higher wages than, say, Whole Foods pays our workers. I doubt they will do that. And will they be unionized? And if they are unionized, then they're going to pay union scale wages, and that's going to make it more difficult to operate their business. So let's just put me down as a very skeptical that they can do that. It's an electionary slogan, right? Politicians make all kinds of promises they don't ever deliver on, and I predict he doesn't deliver on that one.
Did you prefer, on a personal level, the excitement of being a startup entrepreneur or being the CEO of a major public company?
I'd say it's someplace in between those two extreme states. The startup period was difficult. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing. The first store, Safeway, before it was Whole Foods, it struggled. It lost. We opened it with $45,000 in capital, and we lost half the money in the first year. Then we opened up the first Whole Foods market. It was hugely successful, but we had a flood 9 months after we opened, which bankrupted us, except that we theoretically bankrupt, but we were able to climb out due to the generosity of our customers, all of our stakeholders, customers, employees, suppliers, bank, investors, all came through with additional help and additional capital and additional supplies to enable us to skirt that. So those were, and then there was the heady time of the initial growth. It's euphoric almost to see that your ideas are working. Oh my God, this works. We're making money. We're growing. This is fun. And there was this long period of time after the startup phase, and before we'd been seen as a really big corporation. I call that time period, the media loved us. They love small businesses that are successful and growing. And it kind of worked really well. And I think the turning point was probably back in, when Obamacare was launched. And I remember writing it back in, I forget the exact date, but it had to be in 2000 and, when was that? Can't remember. But when 2009, Obama was elected president, he was coming out with Obamacare. I wrote an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal that was critical of Obamacare and said free market solutions were better than what we're doing. This has taken us down the path, the road to serfdom, as Hayek would say. And that was not well received. It was well received in the Wall Street Journal, and it got a lot of comments, but it really turned the media against Whole Foods Market, turned it against me. And we were no longer this darling. We were now a big corporation making a lot of profit, and therefore we're Darth Vader, we'd gone over the dark side. So I'd say that period of time from about the early 1980s until about 2009 was the best period. After that 2009, it wasn't nearly as much fun because now we're being investigated for antitrust by the FTC. We're being attacked by the media. Walmart and all the other guys realize we're very successful, and they're starting to pick up our products and compete with us stronger. And then you have the regulatory agencies are after us. I got sued by the SEC. So it wasn't nearly as much fun. There was a great 25-year, 30-year stretch where it was just the funnest thing I've ever done in my life.
Parts of the book where your libertarianism shines through, the early days you talked about Saferway, having to deal with getting the permits and realizing all the boxes you needed to check. But then again, you kind of referenced it there in 2007 when the FTC tried to block your merger with Wild Oats. Did what they always do, very narrowly define the industry as premium natural grocery market. Did things like this make you more libertarian? Are you more libertarian by experience, or did they just confirm what you already knew to be true about the way government operates?
That's a good question, Ryan. In truth, I don't think those had much of an impact on my libertarian beliefs. They reinforced that government's just coercive power, and generally it's a bunch of bureaucrats that think like Mondami wants to do in New York, that think they know how to operate businesses better than business people do, and that business people are doing things because for the wrong motives. They're greedy, they're selfish, they're not altruistic, and they're attacked for that. They're attacked for their motives, which in fact oftentimes are actually good motives, but they're business. I always say that the media did not like to tell good stories about Whole Foods Market. All the philanthropy we did, all the good things that we did, all the value we created for our employees, our suppliers, our investors, all the customers. We created massive value for every one of our stakeholders. But that's a story the media doesn't want to tell because it wants to tell an anti-capitalist, anti-corporation narrative. So I would say over time, I probably, I'm still a very strong libertarian. I'm probably not quite as strong as libertarian as I was back in, 30 years ago or so, because I had the idealism of youth. The libertarian philosophy could create basically utopia on earth if we would just implement it completely. And I no longer really believe that. I think human nature is very complex. There's a need for a certain amount of government to check and balance. Now we have way too much government, but in general, I'm probably a little more open to some of it than I was when I was younger, when I had the enthusiasm of a new convert to a philosophy.
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of ways that we change our views as we get older. But one area, just stepping back for a second, one policy area that I think your 2007 run-in was a kind of precursor to was this return of this idea about monopolies and breaking up big companies. And it struck me reading your book that kind of grocery stores are quite a good example of an industry where you have a company expand to a whole bunch of different cities. It often increases competition in those local markets, even if it's true that the national market share of that specific company goes up. And you kind of mentioned there that ultimately you were competing with some of the major chain grocery stores. And I just wanted to ask you, as a CEO who operated in the industry, how did you think about competition between firms?
I have a radical view on this. One of the things I believe is that there's no such thing as a monopoly over the long term. You can get strong competitive advantages, and there are a lot of ways to do that. But I remember I've lived long enough to see so many so-called monopolies disappear and be disrupted. I remember when I was younger, General Motors, they were the big monopoly. We needed to do something about General Motors because they were going to take over the complete automobile industry. And yeah, all we had to do was let Japan compete. And then all of a sudden, General Motors wasn't the big, they were more of a paper tiger. And in my lifetime, I saw them go from so-called monopoly to bankrupt, right? They went bankrupt, and Obama bailed them out. And then it was IBM. IBM is going to completely dominate the technology industry. And then, Microsoft came along and Apple came along, and all of a sudden, IBM's still a big corporation, but are they even a top 10 corporation any longer? I don't think they are. And here's my thesis. Basically, innovation never ceases in free markets. Continued innovation all the time is what's happening. Let's take the most recent one. Let's take Google. Gosh, kind of looks like they have a monopoly in search. They dominate it so much. But they do, but will they continue to have that dominance? I don't know if they will or not because of AI, right? I mean, if you do a Google search now, first thing you get is AI overview. You're getting there. But then when we have wearables that we have a AI and it's on our watch, or it's on our, we don't have to do a search. We'll just talk to the AI and it'll give us the same information. So then what does that do to Google? There's just another AI player. Maybe their monopoly in search is just going to become irrelevant. Kodak, they used to have seemed to be a monopoly in film, but then digital technology came along and made it irrelevant. I think that happens to all businesses over time. And also the founders and the entrepreneurs that create them, they get old and they die, and they retire and they die, and then you have professional management that takes it over. They have MBAs or smart people, but they don't necessarily have the same kind of entrepreneurial vision. And so I just don't really believe in any kind of long-term monopoly. I just think things get disrupted, and it's impossible for a corporation unless it uses the government to prevent competition. And therefore, I really don't believe in antitrust. If I was in charge, and as a libertarian, I wouldn't do this, but in general, I'm opposed to antitrust, and I think we should get rid of it because I think it does more harm than good. The market will disrupt all so-called monopolies over time. It might take a decade or two, but it's what always happens.
Yeah, that's one area where I've become more libertarian over time. I used to be one of these good neoclassical economists who was worried about eking out these efficiency gains using competition policy. But you're right, the Schumpeterian kind of creative destruction competition in the long run is all that matters. And, that can occur with overhauling companies, but it can also occur through just introducing new ways of doing things, new products into existing companies, and then they're different companies competing. And, one of the things that you mentioned in the book was that over time, you saw a lot of imitation on parts of Whole Foods' model as you got the big companies like Walmart and Kroger start introducing bigger sections of their store, handing them over to organic produce. So what did you think when you saw that kind of imitation? I guess on one level you were kind of pleased that because it was further in the mission. On the other hand, it's kind of undermining your competitive advantage, right?
Exactly correct on both points. For a long time, I just always thought Whole Foods was just going to be a little niche business. I thought natural and organic was just going to be a small part of the grocery scene. In that sense, Whole Foods could be could dominate that small category. But what ended up happening, to my surprise, is that it went mainstream, and sooner than any of us thought was going to happen. And as a result, as soon as Walmart, for example, committed to selling natural and organic food products, Whole Foods went from number one in market share to number two as soon as Walmart started selling it. And now Whole Foods Market, if it was a standalone business, would probably rank fourth or fifth in most of those categories. You've got Costco, you have Amazon, perhaps Kroger would be bigger than Whole Foods Market and natural and organic now. So that's one of the things that happens when you're successful is you not only is innovation and new disruption there, but you have people that copy what you're doing, and that takes away your differentiation, and then it becomes more of a scale game, and that they have their advantages through having the larger scale.
I was really intrigued by your approach to deal making. You kind of said that, a lot of people go into negotiations and implicitly what they're trying to do is squeeze as much as possible. But your approach, I think you recognize that deals are mutually beneficial, but also there's an opportunity cost to your time. So you always went in with the attitude of what concessions are necessary to get this deal over the line. Now, I've long had a theory that one of the reasons why some people dislike capitalism is, despite the fact that deals are mutually beneficial, people constantly have in the back of their head, well, I could have got a bit more if I'd have tried harder. That guy made a profit as well. I could have squeezed harder.
That's the zero-sum mentality, Ryan. That's the very thing where they don't understand about business and about capitalism. It's not a zero-sum. It's mutual benefit.
Did you always know that implicitly, or is that something that it took you time to kind of develop as you were an entrepreneur?
That's a good question. I never really thought about it. Definitely it's developed more over time, but the roots of it were probably there. I always wanted the other person to feel good about the deal. For one thing, that helps enhance your own reputation for future dealings with other people because they'll say good things about you. Also, you may want to do a deal with this person in the future. So it's not a one-time transaction. You have potential future transactions. And so you want whoever you make a trade with to feel as good about that trade as possible. So that's how I think about it. I always think in terms of a win-win. And I think the most successful deal makers, they do the same thing. And the way I always thought about it is, okay, what is it going to take to get this deal done? And so I always try to find out what the other person wants. And then I can ask the question, am I willing to pay for it? For example, say we're trying to do an acquisition. They're always going to think it's worth more than it is. And maybe we shouldn't have to pay as much if they were rational about it. But this is what it's going to take to get the deal done. And we're still going to win immensely. We're going to change their business model. We're going to make it more efficient. We're going to add our scale. We're going to add our culture. And we're going to get so much more out of this business than they could get out of it once we start actually operating it. So I was always willing to pay a little bit more because I could see how much it would benefit us. And I think that's one of the secrets to Whole Foods' success.
We've just lived through a very high burst of inflation, and people seem still pretty pissed off about it. And they go into the grocery store and they don't like the fact that they're not paying 2019 market prices, despite the fact that, the huge disruptions we've been through have fundamentally changed the economics. So I was just wondering, as a former CEO of a company who, a lot of the business model was about a willingness for people to pay premium for high quality, natural, organic produce in this environment where people are more concerned than before about affordability. How would you navigate that kind of business environment, political environment we're living through?
People are going to believe what they believe, and the media has a continued drumbeat of negativity. They need to read Superabundance or Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, or Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley, or a new book that's just come out by my friend Alexander Green, also another good libertarian, called The American Dream. And he documents how well everybody is off, how much better people are off than the good old days were in every possible way we can imagine it. I think it's not that zero sum is back. It never left. I mean, zero sum is how most people are taught to think. Think about the way sports are. At the end of the day, there's usually just one winner, the champion, and everybody else ends up being a loser and hopes they'll do better next year. In any kind of professional sport, that's certainly true, college sports as well. So, and then most games that we play are that way. They're win-lose games. And so people think that's the way the world works. And it largely has been the way the world works until capitalism came along, until we had a philosophy of voluntary exchange for mutual gain. That changed everything. Once we got the genie out of the bottle, so to speak, and the business people were able to escape from the terrible regulations that made it very difficult to accumulate capital, and if you did accumulate it, no way to keep it stored safely so you could reinvest it. We were in that trap, the zero-sum trap, and we've escaped it. But that doesn't mean human thinking has evolved. Most people still think in terms of zero-sum. They still think in a win-lose model. It is really a win-win-win philosophy. We're all benefiting over the long run. The tide is lifting all the boats. Maybe not equally. There's always going to be the inequality issue, but inequality is never going to go away. Humans are always going to be unequal in beauty, in talent, and intelligence, and drive. There's just no way to make it equal without using coercive power of government and turning yourself into a totalitarian state, which is where socialism always tries to get to in the end, to try to force egalitarian outcomes when it's not what would happen naturally.
We've seen the rise of a Make America Healthy Again movement. It's fair to say from a libertarian perspective, it's a bit of a mixed bag. But one thing that they have been railing against is processed food, ultra-processed food, warning about diet-related chronic disease. So this message is resonating with some conservatives and folks outside the kind of traditional Whole Foods customer base, I put it to you. If you were still CEO of Whole Foods, would you be trying to tap into this development, healthy eating, not just for coastal liberals, but for everyone?
Capitalism provides what people want. And what people want is they want calorie density. They want a lot of calories because it's in our genes. We evolved not getting enough calories for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of years. And so anytime we can get something that has a lot of calories, whether it be fat calories, protein calories, or carbohydrate calories, it tastes good to us. That's what we want to eat. Hey, veggies are incredibly nutritious foods, but they're pretty low on calories, so most people don't like them. Processed foods are loaded with calories. They're loaded with calories, all kinds, sugars, refined grains, oils, all that stuff, put it together. A donut, for example, is nothing but fat and carbohydrates, and people love them. And so now America's 74% overweight and 43 or 44% obese. So, but what are you going to do about that? I mean, yeah, processed foods are killing us. But unfortunately, it's what people want. Are you going to make them illegal? Are you going to create a black market for people going out and getting their donut fix or their French fry fix? Because that's what people want to eat. So it has to be a consciousness revolution. I don't eat that food myself. I'm aware that those foods are bad for me, and I eat to nourish my body, and have done so for many years, and I'm very healthy as a result. But most people, we don't teach nutrition in our schools, and most people are ignorant, and they just eat food that tastes good. I mean, I remember when I got into college, the first thing I was thinking is, I can eat as much ice cream as I want. Fortunately, I didn't stay on that track for very long, and I started to learn about food and nutrition, but I had a consciousness shift. But I don't think you can ask, what can Maha do? Are they gonna use the coercive power of government to prevent people from buying foods that they actually want to eat? I think it's a longer term thing. It's not something easily corrected, and it starts with trying to get people to get education about nutritional, healthy eating into our schools, and for people to pay more attention to it. Otherwise, I don't see that they're just going to make it worse by trying to force people to do things they really don't want to do. And I don't like to see government get stronger for any reason, particularly if it's going to be the food police.
Yeah, more paternalism. John, I'm conscious of time, so I think that's all we've got time for today. But thank you again for joining us for this conversation.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm sorry we got a little bit late start, but enjoyed our conversation, and wish you the very best in all ways.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Cato.